Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mrhappy, aka Mrhappy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. Expect this to be a shorter one, and I mean it this time. I saw there were only like 35 comments on the video, so, factoring in for how many of those are just comments versus questions, I suspect there won't be as many. And number two, I am tired. Aloha keeps waking me up early. Today was leg day. I gotta walk 15 minutes to the gym, 15 minutes back from the gym. Leg day is always a day. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And a little bit of abs today too. Got something in my stomach, but here I am, ready to go. And then I'm gonna chill with some Armored Core this evening, make a bunch of cores, do some fun stuff, maybe do some videos on it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling a new kind of idea coming on, and maybe I want to do that, but we'll have to see. Anyway, let's get to the Q&A. Thanks to everyone sponsoring over on Patreon, by the way. Nobody has to support over there. If you enjoy the video, just enjoy the video. Like, comment, leave a question for next week. Do whatever you got to do. But between Patreon and the super chat thing that YouTube has, those are always options as well, should you feel so inclined. Anyway, with that, let's get into the questions. Hashtag Monday Happies with Happy. Hi, Haps. Hi. Hope you and the cats are doing well. Also, good luck with your new gym and upcoming games. Yeah. Oof. How are the cats doing? Both of them are back there. Let's take a look. Aloha, out cold, and Ivy has noticed that I'm talking about her. Let's move the conversation away before she comes over here. The Shadowbringers role quest introduced us to some intriguing side characters. Later, we received the Void quest, which seemed to be heading in an interesting direction. However, with the 6.x patches, feels like that side quest is stuck in perpetual limbo and been rendered redundant. Do you believe they will provide a wrap-up quest, or are we unlikely to engage with those characters again? If we engage with those characters again, it won't be for a very long time. That quest that they are going on is not just about going to the Void. It's not just about doing this one particular thing like we're doing in the MSQ right now, which is trying to find Vritra, trying to retrieve Vritra safely, I guess, at this point. It's about genuinely saving the Void as a whole, which is just not the direction the MSQ is going. So they're parallel, but they're not necessarily intersecting in any way. Given the sheer volume of quests you need to do in order to get to the Void quests, if they do a follow-up, it will not be anytime soon, and will have to be something that they feel is way more achievable than it was prior to that. It's like somebody could so much more easily just get the jobs they need leveled, and then the number of quests on. I think they're just going to always factor that in, so I don't expect any sort of extension on that quest anytime soon. Not for at least another, 2-3 years minimum, and even then, honestly, I don't expect it. Unrelated to the first question, but do you think they will maintain the trend of introducing new jobs at 10 levels below the current level cap, level 80, i.e. level 80 for the next jobs? It always struck me as odd that the jobs are associated and marketed with the new expansion, yet players have to grind 10 levels to use them in that very expansion. Well, they're definitely not going to start them at expansion level. The whole idea with those 10 levels is you have 10 levels of content you're largely familiar with, or could potentially be on expansion launch. If you're new, that's not really the case. When you pick them up as a newer player, you're picking them up and then taking them into something you don't know as it is, but that's a more natural experience. They want you to take those 10 levels and use that time to get used to the job, and also to do the actual job quests themselves, instead of having to worry about hopping between MSQ and job quests back and forth. It allows you to just focus on those two particular objectives, and I think that is a stronger idea than starting them at the previous level cap as opposed to 10 levels below. There are people who would prefer they start at like level 1. Like, there's people out there who would wish that they started at the absolute bottom, and people had to learn them from scratch like you do with, all the jobs from A Realm Reborn, or at least level 30 or 50. There are people who wanted to start even lower. So I'm glad that they've decided to go with 10 levels, and I see the reason for it. Even if I don't necessarily need those 10 levels to get familiar, nor do I really use them for that purpose. I do like having that 10 levels at least to do the job quest and to focus on that instead. Hashtag with happy Mr. Mondays. Hi. Hello. I'm running an Eden static, wrapping up Eden's verse, so I went through your State of the Realm on the tier to see how it was received, and it was very enlightening. What the... Yeah, the fast, slow instances thing. Oh, man. That wasn't verse. Verse was the second one. That was Eden's Gate. I mean, all the same, we talked about all of Eden, so, it's still a thing. Something that stuck out was how opinions have deviated from back then to now. For example, it seemed on the podcast that Leviathan was positively received for having an evolving encounter, and Titan had mixed reception. Well, now it seems like the sentiment is that Leviathan is too backloaded and Titan is received positively. Yeah, Titan still faces a lot of the same criticisms, but given how a lot of other encounters have been designed since after Titan, we kind of appreciate him a little bit more in retrospect nowadays. Kind of an idea I want to revisit, given that I have my thoughts on Shadowbringers fights video, but like Now, like you've mentioned, in retrospect, like opinion has changed without a doubt. Even Leviathan has been received more positively by the result of things like E7 and P7 existing, where people really don't like them. So it makes people look back at Leviathan and go, you know what, actually, I kind of like that fight for this thing and that thing and whatnot. So they've both been received more favorably over time. Even if on content, the whole slow instance, fast instance thing with Titan was a big problem. And the fact that the front part of the fight was so much harder than every section that came after. Again, there's just little tiny elements that people who did it early or did it a lot notice and can acknowledge now, but still kind of have more appreciation for it over time. Main thing I want to narrow in is that the Titan encounter would often force some form of downtime. It seemed that this was received negatively, or this seems like the exact opposite of the negative sentiment that people are having nowadays with gigantic hitbox and free melee uptime. What changed from back then to now that such sentiment and opinions seem to have flipped? I don't think it's a matter that they flipped. I think it's the way Titan forces downtime. Specifically with Titan, you end up with downtime during situations where you're marked with something that requires you to be away from the boss. Or at the very least, it is the most common sense location for you to be. A great example would be you need to drop into one of the circles on the bottom with a spread marker. And the only one that's available is out of melee range. Like, you either need to get really used to the timing for backing out, or you know, just accept that you're going to have to throw a few piercing talons or something like that. So it's situations like that where there is no form of play in which the player can work to gain uptime. There are some patterns where you can ensure it, and there are some jobs that don't have any issue with it. But things like that are what were criticized. And the gigantic hitbox is that everything is in melee range, so you don't have to do that decision making ever. There's no skill expression is often what you'll hear people say with the gigantic hitboxes. So you can just, you know, move all over the place while doing your rotation. You rarely have to worry about it. And maybe sometimes you have to slip out of melee range. Most of the time it's not the case. So it's not even just flipped. It's just two different types of scenarios that either force downtime or allow so much uptime that there's no skill expression that people just have individual opinions on. So, yeah, that's really all there is. But I think the general consensus on the giant hitboxes is people would prefer something a little smaller, so that there is some degree of skill expression, but without making them like ultra tiny like Garuda in Ultima, for example. Hashtag Monday Happies with Happy. These are getting really confusing for me to read. Greetings, Haps. Hi, I hope the exercising is going well. I'd say so. I wanted to ask, but do you have any advice for someone who wants to get into Eureka for the first time ever? I know I'm late, but I love the elemental armor. I'll be starting from scratch. Is it possible to solo? Hilarious. I have an entire video series on that where it's not so much solo as much as it is not letting my viewers just tag along and do everything with me together, where instead I opt to go into, you know, Eureka and just kind of do what I can do. Any activity I can do solo without joining a party, I do. Any activity where I want a party to improve, you know, rewards or success, I join one of the random ones, shout LFG, make my own, whatever. That video series will hand walk you through everything, and I am planning a sort of update for the free trial. I'm calling it Eureka, where the free trial has certain things that you can't do that do hinder the usual solo experience in Eureka. You know, you have no real way of getting the body pieces that affect your stats, for example, because you can't trade and you can't use the market board. And not to mention, you can only hold 300,000 gil, so you need to be able to buy 2 or 3 of the items anyway. So there's a lot of things that work against you for that, but all it's going to be is kind of judging what it looks like. You know, you can't shout for groups. You need to be invited to a group. So how do you manage that? Do you have a means of success? What is it like? I want to visit all of those things for the free trial version of Eureka, so people can kind of determine whether or not they even want to spend their time with that during the free trial, or just, you know, after they start actually paying for the game to do it. But yeah, it's very simple. Honestly, get the Kieran's Osode, or the Vermilion Cloak, depending on your job. And then, you know, it's just kill enemies, go to as many notorious monsters as you can. And then when you get to Pyros and Hydatos, things change up a little bit because of the action. So there's advice in that series on Pagos Light farming if you're working on the Relic. There's advice in the Pyros and Hydatos ones about getting all of the different Logos actions. So plenty of stuff that's useful. So I would reference that because it's way more in depth than I could give you here. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hi. It's been a while since I've asked, but I have a controversial comment relating to how Endwalker at a base came to a conclusion. Spoilers for those who haven't done it yet. Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's been like a year and a half, so I'm good. Would you have preferred the Scions stay dead after their sacrifices? Them coming back in the finale really took a lot of the weight of the events in Ultima Thule away from me, since it conveys the feeling of death not really mattering if you're a major character. I think it would have been interesting if we had to basically rebuild the Scions for the future. No, I don't think it would have been better if they had stayed dead. Like, I think about the scene of them coming back, and I think about the scenes that followed, and I think about the things that have happened since, and I would not have preferred them dead. I do think there's an overarching issue with them not killing enough characters or not developing stories around that, because you can make moments like that truly surprising and interesting. Papalymo is a great example, going back to the end of Heaven's Ward, where I never expected Papalymo to die. I expected something bad to happen, but that was a huge surprise that seemingly came out of nowhere and was used to try to propel Ida, into accepting her role into the future. Now, depending on how you feel about Stormblood, that was kind of a weird space after that, but that initial idea and introduction worked well. We saw a similar thing with Moonbreeda being used as sort of a spurning point for Urianger J, which paid off later. So I like that the deaths they have done seemingly have great impact on the characters. We even have Louis Swan, his effect, going with Alphino and Alice in the Binding Coils following the events of the end of 1.0. So I guess you could almost say that while I would prefer that they use death a little bit more frequently, it's only because the few times they have done it, it's generally been done to a decent effect. There's probably a few I could think of that are not as well executed if I really think about it. But it's because we so infrequently see them that it makes the ones that we do see that much better. Even losing somebody like Emmett, at the end of 5.0, when he came back for scenes in 6.0 and whatnot and made appearances in places like the Seat of Sacrifice, we didn't... people actually wanted him to come back all the way. It was like the reverse effect. And so it's just a matter of the connection to the character, but it's because his death was so impactful. Elidibus has died 3 times, and all 3 times have been impactful in some capacity. So I don't think just killing them for the sake of killing them would have done anything better. I think that scene is better with them coming back and with everyone being around for what happens that follows. But I think they should play around with the idea more just so we can get more really good developments and moments, as long as it's set up well enough. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Hello. Hi. After watching your tier list for Pandemonium, I was wondering if you do a list like that for different roles. For instance, P5S is my favorite fight as a tank because both tanks have a lot to do in the fight. No, I think that would require me to have too in-depth a knowledge of other roles. And while I do play other roles in content, and I do also understand the perspectives other roles have, that's a lot different than claiming that a fight is better or worse for a role without experiencing it or without having enough experience on said role. I can only kind of side analyze that, okay, well, this is what players of that role were saying, so let me regurgitate that here, but not really have it affect my overall opinion of the encounter, because there are some things that I don't agree with necessarily being, like, bad as a tank. I suppose, like, a lot of people look at E6, for example. You have the conflagrations where you have to, as a tank, basically go to the wall and, like, shield lob, or in the case of Aegis and Paladin, that's a bad example, Tomahawk or whatnot, while just having your tank cooldowns up. And a lot of tanks see that as, not a good mechanic. And I'm like, I mean, the only difference between that and standing in range is you get to do the buttons you would normally do. So, I mean, to me, there's no functional difference there. It's just like, oh, I have to throw a Tomahawk. Well, yeah, all the tanks have to do something like that. It's not like one tank in particular is screwed. If anything, Paladin just glad that they have some means of keeping, going with their normal thing as long as they set it up ahead of time. But then that could screw up all the timings with everything else. So it's like there's all these sorts of like little elements to that I don't necessarily agree with as being good versus bad. But if I try to say that as a non-tank player, it's like, well, of course you'd say that you're not actually a tank, which is why I don't say it in videos like that, because, I am just, saying I don't think that's that bad, but I also am not a tank player. So that's the only reason why. I think it's better off with just like a few comments here or there. Hashtag Monday is happier with Mr. Happy. That one I like. By the time you'll read the... Oh, you didn't say hello. No! Unfortunate. By the time you'll read this, everyone will be playing the indisputably best game of the year, Armored Core 6. I am loving Armored Core 6. I'm going to do a video on Armored Core 6. I'm also thinking about some other things to do with Armored Core 6 and something that I want to do as a whole, but put the pause on that for a second. Sorry for last week's billion-year-long question. Here's a much shorter version of it. Okay, if the 14 dev team could implement 4 or 5 unique buffs that indirectly increase damage without any multiplicative effects, would the game's job design and encounter design be improved by removing all party-wide direct damage buffs? What kind of unique buffs would you like to see? It wouldn't change anything. Like, you'd need to only have personals and no party-wide buffs. Like, if you're saying removing all party-wide buffs. So here's the problem. there's a mix of opinion. Some people want the super intertwined, what's it called? Oh, I had the word and then I let it go. They want the synergy between jobs back. Stuff like Dragoon enhancing Bard's damage because it gives piercing up. There are a lot of people who want that back because it adds a more an interesting element to party building. Whereas now it's just, oh, well, if I have a samurai as a dance partner, I want to be on them versus if I have this job or that job. It's really just like who gets targeted buffs. And then all the other buffs are going to happen at the 2-minute mark anyway. And maybe some little things change depending on what buffs those are, how many there are, what they exact. You just kind of adapt, but still kind of keep things close to the way it is normally. And I think that's probably healthier overall. If you give everyone only personal buffs, you fix the problem of dying screwing you, because if you die around a 2-minute window, you're desynced for the whole fight. Your only other option is to hold them, but then you could lose one entire use for the fight. That's not good either. So you get screwed on that front. Okay, it's not much you could do about that in this particular case. If you have only personal buffs, that doesn't happen. If your personal buffs aren't up when, are about to be up and then you die and then you get up and do them anyway, then you're doing them under weakness, but nothing's really happened. But you also lose pretty much all sort of synergy at all. The real big mindset right now is that people want to affect other people's damage. They want to play around that, but they don't want it to be so strict that if anything goes wrong at all, you are screwed for the entire fight, which is why the kind of 30-second cycle gets talked about a lot with Shadowbringers, where every 30 seconds there was some button you could be pressing. So if you died, you just chose to align with that next 30-second window, even if it wasn't as good as another window. At least it was something, right? That's just not a thing anymore. Like, we have abilities that are on these 30-second windows, but there's not. It's really, everyone has like a direct damage skill that's 30 seconds, or something that's 1 minute that's personal, or something that's 90 seconds that they just press on cooldown, and if it aligns, whatever. It's really that 2-minute window that dominates everything, and if that falls out, you're done. So, yeah, it's rough, but I don't think this would be better. I think it's a different problem overall of essentially removing all synergy between all jobs, which is kind of also a weird thing to do, but that's just a matter of opinion. Hashtag Happy Mondays with Mr. These are just, I don't think a single one has been a normal one. I don't even remember anymore. Hello. Okay, you saved the other person because you said hello twice. A lot of people often ask what are things you wish to see or things you're looking forward to in 14. I wanted to ask if there's anything at this point in the game that you're legitimately just do not like. Something you wish should not have been implemented. Should not have been implemented. It's a lot different than just don't like. Because I always just assume that if I don't like something, it's genuinely just I don't like it. That not other people shouldn't like it. But I have an answer for this all the same, and that's the duty recorder, because that thing is a waste of time. The fact that they even update it's a waste of time. It's just utterly useless. It can't be used on the places where it needs to be used most. You don't have that many slots for it. The clips themselves basically die as soon as another patch comes out, and yeah, the thing's useless. So that's like the only thing I could think of. And I don't think many people would fight me on that. Maybe like 2 people out there would fight me on that, possibly. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. There's a normal one. I was wondering. No, hello again. What's happening? What happened to all your manners? I'm just trying to teach good manners out here. I was wondering if you could speculate on when we might get the Dawn Trail benchmark. Oh, that's not even a matter of speculation. We don't know when it's out exactly. We know summer, but the benchmark is like a month before normally. Like, I think at most a month and a half. So you could just look back at all the old expansions and basically find the lodestone post for when the benchmark was posted, and then subtract expansion launch date from benchmark launch date, and that's pretty consistent across the board. So 60 to 90 days is like the window. I'm sorry, 60 to 90. 30 to like 45 days is like the window you would expect, but won't be for a very long time. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Paisan? You mean, wait, hey, do you mean like paisano? Like Italian? I'm going to assume you do. Hope all is well. Glad to see you pumping out bits. I'm trying. I've heard you say one thing you want changed is glam. What do you think the possibility of getting a glam tab like WoW has? It's like 0%. Here's the problem. I can't say it's 0% because obviously it's technologically possible. It would require them to completely rewrite item code and rework the way it's integrated with the current glam. Basically, you'd have to delete the glam system we have now and rework it from scratch. And they've done a lot of things in this game. That's not what I'm expecting them to do. Maybe they'll come up with another alternative that works with their item code, but I have no hope. So I'm sorry to be negative, but I have no hope. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Afternoon. Good afternoon to you too. Hey, listen, you picked the right time. It's like early 5:30 is like starting to get early evening, but it's summer, so the sun's still out. So I'll take afternoon at this point. Going back to a random question from last week about Scholar and Summoner, I still like that concept, like Bard being a singer or a ranger DPS for say. Give people options, but I know it's a ton of work for the dev team. I'd still love to see it. Oh, there's no question in here. Yeah, it's never going to happen. I mean, I don't know what else to add to that conversation. It doesn't matter if you want it, they're not going to do it because they don't even want it to be that way for Scholar and Summoner. So they're not going to do it for anyone else, so no. Hashtag MHM. I like it. Hello. Do you think the large boss hitboxes? Oh, good. We just talked about this a few minutes ago. Maybe I can cut this from the. Let's check. They've been adding to the game are actually a healthy change. I think that's a matter of opinion. Remember, the slightly larger hitboxes in P1-4S feel nicer from a melee tank perspective, but they've only been getting larger and larger. It makes tanking less interesting because boss positioning essentially no longer a mechanic, makes melee uptime a joke. It almost forces encounter design to become even more simple geometry puzzles. When I bring up shrinking hitboxes again as a possibility, some people are quick to shoot down the idea, but honestly, I think it's... Yeah, so I touched upon that second part a little bit more already. The first part extends a little bit even further than that. If the boss ever does get out of position, the boss also just jumps back to the middle of the room for half the mechanics. So, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of different opinions about it, but they're just that opinions. It's not even a matter of healthy, because if encounter design can be made more, I guess, as you put it, geometrically sound, or what's the term I'm looking for? Not synonymous. What's when it's the same? Symmetrical. There you go. Don't worry, I English sometimes. If an encounter can become geometrically symmetrical, it makes it easier to design, and thus it makes it easier for the player to understand. It doesn't necessarily make the mechanic easier, especially as we've seen from P1, where you have 9 boxes and a way of solving it, and everyone loses their mind about needing to swap with one other person. Ugh. And things being circles and squares. Like, we've seen how they've used those things to effectively make mechanics that are far more easy to understand and easy to repeat, but not necessarily easy to execute or understand at a first go. You still need to kind of go through the similar process, but you can start to break it down to its more core elements. So for some people, that's a healthy change. To others, the enlarged hitboxes is, as you've said, it's removing parts of the game that would otherwise be a form of skill expression. So, whereas I mentioned the melees in the previous question, you're talking about the tanks and the movement. Yeah, I mean, it does depend, because, like, I've tanked Garuda and Uwu, and I hate moving that little harpy. Her hitbox is so tiny, and it's so aggravating, but it's aggravating for a completely different reason. Obviously, I think there's a nice middle ground, and I think it's okay to have some bosses with tiny hitboxes, some with large, etc., etc. I don't think it needs to be one way or the other all the time. But what I do think is that whether or not it's healthy is not for me to say, because it's literally on a case-to-case basis, where sometimes a boss hitbox is a perfectly reasonable size for solving mechanics, and you still need to do things a certain way, and other times it's just not the case. So it just depends on the fight. Hashtag Mrhappy Monday. That is a Thornton reference. Hey, Apps, hope you're doing all right. I'm doing all right, or I was until I read that. Bit of a weird question, but here we go. How do you deal with DPS anxiety if you ever had it? I've never had DPS anxiety. I've had, like, I don't know how to play this job, and I'm, like, kind of laughing to myself at, like, trying to keep it together. Like, when I was first learning Black Mage, and I was just like, so I don't have any triple casts here, so Scathe? That's not a great decision, but it's the decision I'm making. That's not really anxiety, though. That's more like, well, I'm dumb, and I'm going to make this funny in some way, shape, or form. No, I don't have DPS anxiety, because DPS is, like, it doesn't require much of my brain power most of the time. So if it doesn't require brain power, I can't be anxious about it. So that's me. So I got nothing for that one. Hashtag Mrhappy Monday. Hello. Hi. Hope you're having a swell day. Swell, because I went to the gym. Never mind. I've been looking for an answer to this online with no avail, so I was wondering if you knew the answer, your input on it. Okay. Why are we still unable to party queue into unranked Crystalline Conflict? Seems like a baffling decision to me. I understand not being able to do it for ranked, but I, for the life of me, can't figure out why it's unavailable in a casual setting. It's funny, because you kind of answered the question. You understand why it's for ranked. It's actually the same reason for unranked, because players will group up and bully the unranked players, and thus they have a bad experience when they're looking to have a more casual experience. Whereas in ranked, it's a clear competitive advantage. In unranked, it is not as much as a competitive as much as it is a clear advantage in some way, which can ruin the experience for others. I will say I don't agree with that assessment, but I get it. Now, I'm also saying they've never said that. That's just, I look at it, and that seems like the obvious reason to not allow it. I think they should allow it, but that would be the reason I would guess they wouldn't allow it. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Hello. Hi. Hope you're doing all right. Doing great, thanks. I've had a couple of questions regarding fates. Currently in Endwalker and back in Shadowbringers, we have the bicolor gemstone currency to make doing fate somewhat worthwhile. Can't help but notice that no such system exists prior. So what were the fates actually for? Leveling. That's it. And maybe like an achievement or two. And maybe the relics. The relics required the fates for those expansions. And that's it. That's the reason you did it. They didn't make another reason for you. So, that's it. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Hi. Hi. How are you? Great. Thanks. During the keynote, when they showed multiple new jobs, they also had the background, the job portraits of Dragoon and Black Mage. On the surface, this corresponds to the two new jobs being melee DPS and magical range. But going a little deeper, do you think the devs could have been hinting at how they're planning for the new jobs to play? No. No. Because Dragoon, because we're getting a scouting job. I wouldn't expect a scouting job to be like Dragoon. And I wouldn't expect another job to be like Black Mage. So, no. I think this is classic looking too much into it. They just showed two jobs, and that's it. And one of them is Black Mage, and the other one's Dragoon, and that's kind of it. Like, they're two very popular jobs, and Dragoon is being reworked. We already know that. Black Mage, who knows what they'll do with it, but I don't think that has any correspondence whatsoever. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Hello, Happy. Hi. I hope you're well. You too. My question is, do you think Estinian will ever get a job change? No. Do you think he'll just always be the Azure Dragoon? Yes. He's the only Scion who hasn't changed his job because he is a second-rate Scion. You have to remember that most of the Scions didn't job change so much as they picked up a new combat art. The big thing with those who train in Charlian, the Archons, as they're called with the tattoos, they don't have a specific job. Yes, for the sake of simplicity, when we do like trust and duty support, they do have jobs. But they just literally adjust their combat style depending on what they need. Estinian is no such thing. He was born and raised to wield the lance. He has a piece of Nidhogg in his soul. He is the Azure Dragoon. He doesn't have the capacity. I mean, he could probably if he really set his mind to it. But that's the core like aspect of him that is likely to remain the same. It's like the most defining character trait. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello, Mr. Happy. Hi. I just finished clearing Anabasios or Anabasios Savage, and since it was my first current release Savage here, I had a few questions about the rules behind Savage mode that I've had trouble wrapping my head around. Okay. First off, why are we required to re-clear floors in order every week after clearing them once? Is this some sort of holdover from the old days or other games served as a blueprint for how raiding would be structured? I can't imagine how it helps keep each raid populated throughout the week when there are ways around this restriction. The number one thing is most people are always too lazy to go around restrictions. Most people just go in order because it is the simplest thing to do. It is the most common sense, like natural human thing to do. Even though you could go around it. I mean, people can go to other servers to look for better prices on the market board, and very few people do that. So this is basically in that same vein. People just don't do that. Not to mention that people they want people to, and in that same vein, I guess actually I should relate the two. When you're doing Party Finder, that forces people who naturally think that way to go through them. Okay, I'm going to do 9, I'm going to do 10, I'm going to do 11, I'm going to do 12. And then that helps keep those individual ones populated for the people who come later, and then the people who come later have to do the same thing, etc., etc., etc. So once they've unlocked it and people can just do whatever they want, it's because at that point that cycle is no longer relevant enough. It's faded off enough that it's not bringing in enough new people who need help or trying to get their clears or whatnot. And now it's just open to everyone. So that's the main reason. Those are a couple of the main reasons why it would be that way. What's the deal with the first floor dropping all of the accessory coffers but not the accessory upgrade item? Because they want you to do the next fight to get that. Because now you're doing 10 and you've got these 3 left side upgrades, but you also want the accessory upgrade. And then you get the body and the legs from the third fight, but you also want that other upgrade. They essentially are creating purpose for all the fights. The first fight is all accessories, the thing you need the most of. You even need 2 rings. So because there's just so many slots for that one in particular, just filter them all there. The second fight, head, hands, boots, But in case you don't need those, you also have Tombstone upgrade mats. And given you can only get so many per week, you know, getting them from the second fight makes sense. Third fight, you got the body and the legs, but you also have the upgrade material for the left side, which even if you don't need body or legs, very good chance that you need that for the remaining left side pieces. So it's just creating purpose for everything. That's essentially all the answers to all the questions here, is to ensure there's a steady flow of people with a very crafted purpose going through everything to make sure that there's nothing that feels largely excluded. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hi. I started playing 11. Ugh, stop it. I know my own punishment. I have to play again at some point this year anyway, so I feel ya. I haven't played since Wings of the Goddess. Besides the Final Fantasy 11 wiki guide, is there any other resource or video I think you should check out? No, as if you're doing, you have the 1 to 119 guide open, which actually, there's another guide that links the 1 to 119 guide, and I forget what it's called. There's just a totally different one. Oh, no. The 1 to 119 guide links to Fantastic EXPs and where to find them. That's what it is. Honestly, yeah, the 1 to 119 guide is everything. So just that. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps, how are you? Doing great, thanks. I tried getting a refund for Armored Core 6 and was denied since I tried the game for 4 hours and didn't even get last chapter 1. I'm pretty frustrated. Or past chapter 1. Last, yeah. They're pretty close to each other on the keyboard. My question for you is, do you think the game, they will add some accessibility options, as I find the controls really awful and stiff along with terrible HUD to make the game really unbearable to play? So what I'm reading here is you have not customized your core very much, because the controls for every different like leg piece and even the head piece and the targeting system, those are all up to you. So the controls can be really bulky if you're doing something that's on the heavier front. You may have seen, I've been playing with the hover legs, for example. So on the ground, they're very, very stiff. I don't have great turning without a quick turn or something like that, or going through the boost. But when I swap to my bipedal ones, when I go for my big, my laser core, I can zip all around. So the controls are perfectly fine, but you need to customize and find a core with which works for you. I don't know. The HUD's not terrible. I mean, it just sounds like it's not your taste, is what it sounds like. Because you're making blanket statements about certain things and not expressing them really as opinions. So, I mean, the only advice I have is to experiment more and just try to learn things. But if it's not for you, it's also not for you. I mean, these aren't things that need to be changed about it. It's got a better HUD and better controls than most of the other Armored Core games. I don't know. 4 Answer and Verdict Day both have pretty damn good controls. But if you were to go back and play like 3, I mean, to be fair, PS2 game, but like, you'd lose your mind compared to the way that the newer ones are. Hashtag Monday Happies with Happy. Hey, Haps. Hi. While leveling my EU alt, I started thinking about... God, EU alt. I don't want to do that. Thinking about Yoshi P's statement about creating a new starting place for new players. From experience, going through A Realm Reborn to Endwalker again is a bit much. What do you think of this idea where a new player is allowed to choose their preferred expansion MSQ, and once they complete it, they are auto-leveled to be ready to start the current expansion? This be a good way of alleviate the daunting task. So... all Yoshi P has said is that they want 6.1 to maybe be a potential new jumping on point because it's after all that other stuff. So this isn't much to speculate on. We already know if they do something, that's the plan. If you're a new player, you would start at 6.1 story. Now, how that works in reality, we have no idea because it was just a passing comment that he made, and he said he'd like to have something like that ready for 7.0. This is a matter of wait and find out, because we can, if we create too much expectation, then that creates problems as a whole. So I'd rather not dive too deep, because then people are going to say, oh, well, this person said it would be like this. We don't know that. We don't know anything for certain other than exactly the words that he has said, but we don't even know what those mean all the way. So I don't want to go too much into that. But looking, it looks like that's all of the questions that are here. There's a few more troll job-based questions, but you know, those are just for fun. So there's, you know, this is all there is. So that's gonna be a wrap for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. If you have a question, don't forget, put it in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And I will see all of you in next week's Q&A. Until then, I bid you adieu. And until then, bye-bye.